Hi friends, thank you for tuning in today. Today's episode is about CTE, or chronic traumatic encephalopathy. I feel that this is a really important topic and I'm so grateful for my guest shedding more light on it for us. However, I want to put a trigger warning at the beginning here to let you know that we discuss topics including suicide, mental health crises, and a recent shooting. So if those are too heavy for you right now, you might want to hold off on listening to this episode. Hi friends, thank you for tuning in to the Concussion Coach podcast. I am Bethany Lewis, the Concussion Coach. I'm a neurological occupational therapist and certified life coach, and I specialize in guiding people through their concussion recovery journey. I am passionate about helping people understand their injury, speed up their recovery, and reclaim control over their life post-concussion. The purpose of this podcast is to help increase awareness of concussions and the impact they can have on a person's life, and to bring hope to people who have suffered a concussion and those who love them. I firmly believe that sharing stories and knowledge about concussions will bring important light and understanding to this misunderstood and often invisible injury. The information in this podcast is meant to bring that awareness and hope and is not meant as medical advice. The opinions shared are those of the interviewees and my own. If you are suffering with lingering concussion symptoms, I have created a concussion coaching program specifically for you. I will be your mentor to guide you through your recovery journey, offering help with understanding and managing your symptoms, setting achievable goals, and learning how to manage your own thoughts and nervous system in order to get control over your life again. If this program sounds like something that would help you or someone you love, sign up for a free consultation. In the consultation, you'll get valuable information and resources and gain hope for your future. Sign up for your free consultation at the link in the show notes or at my website, www.theconcussioncoach.com. Hi friends, welcome back to the Concussion Coach podcast. Before I introduce my guest today, I just wanted to make sure you all know about the free guide that is available on my website. It's the 5 best ways to support your loved one dealing with a concussion. So if you have a friend or family member who is struggling with post-concussion symptoms, or if you're the one struggling and would like your loved ones to know more about what you're going through and how they can help, head over to my website, www.theconcussioncoach.com, and download the free guide. Today I have a special guest. Her name is Laura Dyer, and she's a neighbor of mine, and her mother is a close friend of our family. Laura combines her professional background as a registered nurse and healthcare leader with deeply personal advocacy following her brother's posthumous CTE diagnosis from Boston University's Unite Brain Bank /CTE Center earlier this year. With clinical training from Johns Hopkins University and over 15 years in healthcare, Laura offers a unique perspective on the medical and family impacts of repetitive head trauma as she shares her family's research journey and ongoing efforts to bring awareness to CTE in football players. I am so grateful that you're willing to come on and talk with me today about this tender and fairly recent experience and what you've learned about CTE. This is a topic that I've been wanting to bring some more light to on the podcast for a while, and I'm definitely not an expert on it. So I'm really looking forward to expanding my knowledge on this condition through our conversation today. And I believe it will be very helpful for people who hear this. So thank you so much for being here, Laura. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
So before we get into your brother's story, can we first give people a quick overview of what CTE is and how it's different from a concussion? I know we can get more into the details later, but I do want our audience to have some context for what we're discussing today. Like when we say CTE, what is that?
Yeah, absolutely. CTE is also known as chronic traumatic encephalopathy. That's what it stands for, CTE. And it is a brain disease, actually. And it's very similar in some of it, like how it manifests in the brain tissue. That's very technical and scientific, I know, but it's like a degeneration of the brain tissue. What researchers have found just in the past several years is that it's caused by repeated head injuries. The most interesting fact that I've learned in all of the research that I've done to learn more about this is that it does include concussive hits, but it includes non-concussive hits as well. It's years and years worth of repetitive head trauma that accumulate in a degeneration of the brain. Essentially, the nerves start to die, and then the brain starts to shut down. So that is really what CTE is. It is a accumulation of many years, most often like decades worth of playing a contact sport, or they're actually finding it in military, those who have been exposed to concussive waves from like explosions. So anything where you have your brain like rattled in your skull, so it's hitting the sides of your skull, that's really what CTE is caused by, that hundreds, if not thousands of times over many, many years.
Okay, thank you. And I think that is a really important and interesting point, that it isn't necessarily concussions. Like it's not to the point where that somebody would necessarily feel the symptoms of a concussion. It's the below concussion level, but still trauma and that rattling, jostling inside the skull.
Yeah, yeah. Which is
Yeah.
why I think for so long, and even now in football, like they talk a lot about concussions. That's definitely part of it. It's not important, but it's more than that. And that's the part that is not yet getting a lot of attention and conversation is the sub-concussive impacts and how that adds up over time. So that's the part that I think really, at least from my perspective and how much I've learned, that's the part that I think needs to get more discussion going, is it's that cumulative effect. It's not just one or two hard hits, it's years worth of repetitive head trauma.
Thank you. That is so important. And we will dive more deeply into that in a little bit. And I am so thank you for that summary there. I think that will be helpful as we go into this. So can we jump into your brother's story? Let's hear about Greg. Tell us about
Yeah.
I got to read, I know there have been a couple news articles about him that you've posted and I read them and it makes me sad that I didn't get to meet him. He sounds like he was a really great guy. So at what point did you and your family start to realize that he might be struggling? Like, let's hear his story.
Yeah. So, well, Greg started playing football when he was 9, tackle football. And he was very large for his age. And so football was like a very natural place to put him. There's family history of football. My mom's father and her uncles played football. So it was yeah, let's put you in football. Let's put some of that size to use. And he loved it. And he was really good at it. And so he, of course, grew up. He played high school. He started. He then went on to play college. He played and he ended up starting at the University of Utah. So he was a starting defensive tackle. So he was on the D line. And his senior year was the year that the Utes won the Sugar Bowl against Alabama. So 2009. It was obviously a huge year for the Utes that kind of propelled the Utes on to be, to promote them into the Pac-12, to put the school on the map in a lot of ways. It led to a lot of positive things for the school. And he was part of that team. And he, again, loved it. And he was voted by the team the most inspirational player his senior year. He was known to just have like a big heart, always willing to support other people. He was always looking out for other people. I think part of that just, growing up, feeling like he didn't really quite fit in when he was younger, finding his place in football, like that was his family, his second family. So he felt like a real strong connection to the members of his team. They were like his brothers. He graduated in 2009. And as far as when we started to see or notice things, it was actually a year after he graduated that he made a comment to me that was really out of character for him. He made a comment that he was hearing voices. Specifically, he said that he was hearing angels speaking to him, which was very unlike him. And I remember being worried at the time, like the way that he said it, just something didn't feel right. But aside from that, like he seemed normal. Like there wasn't anything else concerning from what we could see. Things really started to get more noticeable by people other than me when he actually decided that he wanted to serve a mission for our church in 2012. So a few years after his graduation. And he went out to Tampa, Florida, and he was sent home for mental health reasons. And he came home and lived with my husband and I at the time. And he was trying to make his way back to being able to finish out his mission. He ended up serving a few more months in Ogden, but similar challenges. Mental health, the stress, I guess, is something that can really trigger and set off people that have this diagnosis. So the stress of being out there, trying to serve, trying to do what was being asked of him was really hard for him. And that really was something that we noticed, our family noticed, of course, his companions and people in the church noticed. And that was when we started to know something was different. Something was not quite right. He came back. He ended up getting a job. He worked in finance. Like he graduated with economic degree. He was not, I don't want to say dumb, but he was a smart guy. he really understood finance. He wanted to work on Wall Street in New York. So he found a way into the finance world, and he was working for an international bank that had a headquarter or branch, I guess, in downtown Salt Lake. So he was working for a bank there. They ended up closing down their branch here, and they asked him if he would be interested in moving to Connecticut to work for one of their branches back there. Like, he was doing a really good job for the company. He decided not to, and instead found a job working for a different bank in New York City. And he moved to New York City, and he was working essentially on Wall Street. Like, he was working for as a financial analyst, so working with large sums of money. This was about 2018. And he started having some more episodes and issues, and he ended up losing the job as a result. There were some things that he posted online that were inappropriate. One of his coworkers saw it and then reported him, and he lost his job. Then COVID hit shortly thereafter, and he was in New York City at the height of COVID, which, for those who may or may not remember, in New York City, it was like lockdown. He was in a studio apartment. And he was by himself in a studio apartment. And there was this, panic, and people, he could not interact socially with anybody. And I think he was by himself without any like personal interaction for like 50 straight days. And we think that really took a toll on him. Shortly after that, he ended up moving back to California. And that was in late 2020. And he passed away last year, so 2024. So the last 4 years of his life was in California. And it was the way that his life ended was very unrecognizable comparing to where he had been previously, with how successful he had been in football, his dedication to just life, and how he really wanted to make a name for himself. He was homeless when he passed away. He was trying to self-medicate to deal with some of the symptoms. Because really, from his perspective, at least this is my opinion, I think he felt like medicine had failed him, because he was in and out of mental health institutions. He stayed at a place for 18 months, like a long-term treatment facility for 18 months, trying to deal with what he was going through, trying to get the right medications and balance, and nothing ever really worked for him. And so I think he felt like medicine failed him. And so he was trying to self-medicate. He started getting crystals and collecting crystals, thinking that those were going to help improve his behavior, his brain. Like, just, there was a lot of fantastical things that he started talking about and writing about in his journals. That's where we got a lot of insight into what was going on with him, because he journaled actually quite a bit. And things got more fantastical as time went on. So he did pass away last year. And it was not necessarily related to CTE. It was unrelated, but the only way that you can be diagnosed with CTE in today, in current state, is after someone has passed away. They cannot diagnose CTE in a living individual. So when we found out that he had passed away, that was when I made the approval from my parents to donate his brain to the brain bank for research. So that was just this past year.
Thank you for sharing all that. And again, I recognize this is so fresh. So I do appreciate your willingness to share here. I just want to bring out a couple of things before we keep going. The fact that he was having hearing voices and things like that, that is, I remember doing a podcast about mental health and concussions. And I remember asking I was speaking with Dr. Spangler. I can link to that episode in here. It was a really, really good episode. She had a lot of really important insights. And I asked her what were some things that people would not expect, because there's a lot of things that can be related to a head injury that you wouldn't necessarily expect, like stomach issues, or like just the dysautonomia, like heart rate issues. Like, anyway, there's a lot of things that can be related that people wouldn't necessarily know. And I asked her what would be something that you would not expect to be possibly related to it. And she said psychosis was something that you would not typically think of as something that would be associated with a concussion. And so the fact that he was having some kind of like psychosis things happening does make it feel like it's not straight up concussion related. So maybe that was, and I don't know, is that something that is typical with the CTE population, do you know?
It's
Or
not. It's not.
okay.
That was one thing that they did mention. There have been other players that have had similar manifestations of like hallucinations and like extreme paranoia, which my brother had. But it's not common. And that's, I think, one of the biggest things with CTE that's been so hard. The sample size that they're pulling this data from is so small, right? And they don't have like this broader sample set that they're studying to say like what is common, what is not. So they're just pulling whatever they can from the sample size that they have, and they're trying to put the pieces together. They're trying to understand like, why did this person manifest that way? Why did those symptoms show that way and they didn't in this person? Why are there so many football players that are living their lives without issue that clearly had a lot of head injury while they were playing? There's still so many questions that have not been answered that they're trying to get answers to. I mean, I found this interesting. The National Institute of Health and the CDC, they just came out in 2022, so 3 years ago, publicly agreeing that CTE was the result of repetitive head trauma. I mean, that's how new this is. It's not like they've been sitting on this for a long time. And just now it's getting a lot of conversation. It's very recent that all of this is happening, that they're actually coming out and saying, yes, we now see that this is linked. So yeah.
That's fascinating. So what are some of the symptoms that he was experiencing? And I don't know if you knew about them at the time. I mean, he lived with you. Like it's interesting. I would love to hear what those symptoms were, and also if you said he felt like medicine had failed him and he'd gone to all these doctors. Did they know that he was dealing with like brain injury, CTE kind of things, or was it just strict mental health? So what were you seeing, and then what was being presented to the doctors?
Yeah, great question. So what we observed, extreme paranoia. One of the, like, I'll give you an example. When he was homeless, this was a year, or actually maybe like 6 months before he had passed away, he was convinced that someone was chasing him with a hatchet. It was very specific. This was in California. He, so much so that he took a brick and threw it through a glass door of this senior center near where he was living at the time. And he told the police in the police report, because he waited for the police. Like, it's not something that someone was just vandalizing a building would do, right? He waited for the police to come. And in his police report, he said, I did that on purpose to get the police to come so they would protect me from this man who was chasing me with the hatchet. So it's very intentional in his mind that there was something, this person was chasing him, and that was his way to be safe, or to find safety. That unfortunately led to a felony conviction, and the judge then ended up, I guess the judge knew my brother from a previous court case, and then they reduced it to a misdemeanor. But yeah, there's no evidence, there was no proof that someone was chasing him with a hatchet. Just his word that that's what happened and why he did that. So but that was the extreme paranoia. Like, somebody was out to get him. That the hearing voices was really big. He would claim that he was hearing angels speaking to him, or a revelation, and that he knew things that were going to happen. And so he was often telling us about all of these things that he was hearing. The big thing, though, and this is one of the common symptoms with CTE, is aggression and impulse control. Like, no impulse control. He was very impulsive. It got worse as time progressed, but that was one of the things we observed, was that he was very impulsive, was not rational in his thought patterns, and he could be very aggressive. Thankfully, he never took his aggression out on other people. I know that has been the case with other football players that have had CTE and been diagnosed. Thankfully, that was not him, but he could be very verbally abusive to those around him. And that was, I think, a big struggle for my mom in particular, my parents, and of course me and my family as well. We did witness it while he was here. We often saw him talking to himself. He couldn't sleep at night. We'd hear him pacing. he couldn't stay asleep, and so he would get up and walk, but he would talk to himself while he was doing it. So those were some of the things we observed, and this was in 2013, so 10 years ago, and just got progressively worse from there.
Yeah, that's I can't even imagine how hard that would be as a sibling or a parent to see that happening and not know what to do about it. And as you're talking about that, like it does the paranoia, the voices, that was he ever diagnosed with like schizophrenia or something? I know that's the age where that come out for people.
Yeah, so that was to answer your other question, was he ever, or when he was meeting with the physicians, did they ever consider or include that in their factor, like diagnosing him with something that he had a football history, that he had likely had multiple head traumas over the years? No, that was never discussed. It was never considered. Whether it was because he didn't bring it up, or they didn't ask, or combination of both, I don't know. But they had running theories that he had bipolar. That was what he was diagnosed with while he was on his mission, bipolar 1, type 1, so with manic episodes. He did also have depressive episodes, which is something that they do see commonly in patients with CTEs, anxiety and depression. So he was diagnosed with that. They were tossing around like schizoaffective because of some of the behaviors and some of what he was exhibiting. They felt like schizoaffective might fit, but when they tried to treat based on those diagnoses and the medications that they would give to a patient that had those diagnoses, it never worked. So it kind of threw those theories out the window. But yes, those were what we kept hearing from the physicians those early years was, we think he's got a mental health issue. It's this or this. We can't quite figure it out.
Oh, yes. Okay. And looking back, it makes so much sense. And I could see how it would be so confusing for everybody. Like, what is happening? And having that, yes, the mental health, like the more extreme, like the paranoia, the voices, those things like that on top of the stuff that is more common with brain injury things, like I could see how that just is so confusing and complex. Like the brain is so complex, and there's so much to it. So how did you know to send his brain into Boston University? When did you become aware that this was a thing?
So they haven't been around for long. I mean, about 10, 15 years, but I remember reading an article, and I pulled it up again today just to, reread it. And I remember reading it, and I think it's even more telling now if I read it, and I read it again today. My husband read it again too, and we were like, it's Greg's story all over again. I read an article in the LA Times in 2018, 2017 about a USC football player that had been, whose brain had been donated. But in the article, they had interviewed the player's family. And there were some things that they mentioned in the article that I was like, oh my gosh, that's Greg. Like the way that they described it, that he was hearing voices, thinking that they were angels. I guess this player also would go on to tell people in the hospital that he was Jesus Christ, and like just very fantastical thoughts. He was self-medicating in and out of jobs, trying to, and he did end up like homeless, and then he passed away, and they donated his brain. And of course, he went on to be diagnosed with CTE. But in that article, they hadn't quite figured that out yet, but they had donated his brain. That's what led me to find out more and to look into it, because some of what they reported and some of the symptoms that they mentioned were so strikingly similar, eerily similar to what Greg had experienced. So that's what got me started. And I did a lot of research to understand, what is Boston University doing? What is this CTE center? What's the Unite Brain Bank? And really what they're doing and what they're trying to do is bring more light to this reality that there is a connection between contact sports and this disease called chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE. They have been at the forefront of really pushing this research forward. They have focused a lot of their energy on researching it in football players specifically. They do research other contact sports. They do research military veterans as well, but they've received a lot more attention, media, because of their focus on football players. They've received a lot of NFL football players that have donated their brains. I think the most notable is Junior Seau, who played for the San Diego Chargers. He was famously, he passed away, but he intentionally shot himself in his stomach to preserve his brain so it could be studied. And I think that was really when the conversation started happening more out in the open, because he was an NFL player and he wanted this to be known. And so he had his brain donated. And that this is only within the last less than 10 years, right? So 2017, 2018 is really when they started to pick up speed in terms of the brains that have been donated. I think they now have in their brain bank, so they call it the Unite Brain Bank. That's where they store all of the brains that have been donated. They have 1,300 in total across all of the different areas that they are studying. One of the most, it's heartbreaking, but the youngest brain that they have is from a 17-year-old that was diagnosed with CTE. So yeah, it's not like this is only 20s, 30s, 60s and beyond. They did a whole study on a small sample size, but a sample size nonetheless, of high school players that have just played high school, never played college, never played professionally. And they've found it. I think where they're kind of some of their recent research, again, this is all still very new, there's still a lot that they're trying to learn, is that there's a threshold, 5 years and up. If you play a contact sport for 5 years minimum, that's when you are at risk, or you're more at risk for developing CTE, is 5 years of a contact sport. So if you're at 17, if you had played starting when you were 12, and maybe you were really aggressive, maybe you really liked to hit. My brother was one of those players. He really liked to hit. You could probably rack up enough head injuries, even within a short span of time, to develop CTE, which is crazy. So their whole mission, there is a lofty goal of ending CTE. If you talk to the physician who's running the research group, her name is Dr. Ann McKee. She would love to see, football stop, but that's not the reality, right? And she knows that. She'll say that, the only way to stop CTE is to stop contact sports. That's not going to happen. So what do we do instead? I know that they're taking a lot of steps to mitigate and reduce the risk of CTE, but it's due to the research that Boston University has done that is giving us this information to make some of these decisions. I think one of the most notable things that I actually didn't know about until recently, within the last couple of years, they pushed I don't know if it's a national youth soccer association or however. I know that it does, it affects our youth soccer teams here, because my kids both play soccer. They were able to affect the change where kids are not allowed to head the ball in soccer before they're 12 years old. That was actually a direct result of Boston University's work. They pushed for that hard, and they were able to get that passed, or it's not a law, but it's, they were able to get agreement from the National Youth Soccer Association to disseminate that rule to all of the state youth soccer leagues, to where now if a soccer player is not yet 12 years old and they head the ball, it's a foul. So they're not allowed to head the ball in their games. So just a lot of little things that they're learning, and they're trying to do what they can to help influence and change how we do things to reduce the risk of CTE.
Yeah. I feel like this is one of those things that we'll look back on years down the road and be like, I can't believe we were doing that before. Yes, I love that advocacy is happening and that they're making those changes to protect kids' brains. That's huge.
Right.
I'm curious, and this like, yeah, I remember your mom telling me, and she didn't mention the name of the football player, but that particular suicide where he like made sure his brain was preserved, that just brought me to tears the first time I heard it. And, like and such a young kid at 17. How, and this is a delicate topic. I maybe need to put a trigger warning at the beginning of this episode, but are most of these brains that are being donated, like they're not typically older people, right? These people are dying when they're younger. Is that right?
That's actually a good question. And they started out more with older brains,
okay.
50, 60 years plus. The trend has been, I say, more concerning and alarming in that more recently it's been younger brains. They started off, like some of their first brains that were donated were, much older gentlemen who played college, played pro in the 70s and 80s, which at the time in those decades, football also looked a lot different than it does now. And so they're finding that, there's a lot younger players that are having these issues and then donating their brains now, which is, I'm hopeful that some of the changes that they're trying to make in college and hopefully in high school as well will help reverse that trend or somehow change that trend. But that is the current trend, that they're having more and younger brains more recently.
And is there any similarities as far as the method of death? Like, is it a lot of suicides, or like your brother was not a suicide intentionally, but like he was not in a good place, right? Like, do you know,
Correct.
can you speak to that at all? Like,
yeah, and it's an interesting question. I mean, there is a very noteworthy, like newsworthy recent headline of the player who was originally from Southern California, was living in Las Vegas. And it was actually a few days after my brother's article was posted in the New York Times that he drove from Vegas to New York City to the NFL headquarters. I don't know if you remember hearing about this.
yes.
And he took in a machine gun and shot several people, killed several people, and then turned the gun on himself and killed himself. Similar, though, he shot himself in the chest, asking for his brain to be studied. I would say that's not the norm. I feel like that's what gets news attention, is when that happens, unfortunately. But that is not necessarily the norm. There definitely have been some high profile cases where that was the case, where the player did commit suicide. And now that I'm thinking about it, there have been a few that I do know of where it's been quieter, but suicide. I think that and I was reading this actually before we met today, some of what they've found, experts are finding, is that if CTE symptoms appear in younger years, so 20s and 30s, they manifest as mental health and behavioral issues. So depression, anxiety, impulsive behavior, and aggression. There's a second form of CTE that they're starting to establish patterns around, and that is the CTE that's discovered, or the symptoms that are identified later in life in the 50s and 60s. And those often appear more like dementia. Trouble with memory, trouble with thinking, really not able to function like as a normal human being. That's CTE, but those are usually stage 3, stage 4. So I guess I didn't explain this either. There's 4 stages of CTE. Stages 3 and 4 are, of course, the more progressive, more severe. Those are more often found in older individuals because, again, it's a degenerative disease. There's no cure. It just continues to get worse with time. Depending on what parts of the brain that's degenerating, like, you might see different behaviors. different manifestations. And the older individuals, again, they're still trying to put all the pieces together of like, why did they maybe not exhibit the same symptoms when they were younger? Why did it just progress? And then finally, when they were in their older years, it just looked like dementia. They still don't know. There's still a lot that they're trying to understand. But individuals that my brother had stage 2. So stage 1, stage 2, those are often diagnosed or found in younger individuals. And those in current stage, like current day, those are more attributed to like the mental health, behavioral issues, anxiety, depression, not so much like the more advanced dementia. Just there's, again, so much that they're still trying to understand about how this looks, because their sample size is so small that they're working with. They can't really establish clear patterns quite yet because they don't have enough to really generate those conclusions. They're doing their best, but there's still so much to learn.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all of this. Did your brother have other, like, I know about the mental health and the impulsivity, the aggression, those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
Were there cognitive issues that you noticed? Did he have memory problems or trouble with planning and, those executive function kind of things?
Interestingly, not really. Now, he would have periods of time where he was very logical. He was very level-headed. And this is why they had him, why they diagnosed him with bipolar, because he would then go into like a more manic episode, like what would be a traditional like manic episode. And he would go into this period of time where he was not able to make rational decisions. But it was not so much like it wasn't coming from like a state of he couldn't make decisions. He was just making the wrong decisions, if that makes sense. So he was just more on the manic side. And then he would come out of that and he would be more normal again. And then it would go through these cycles of, that's again why for a while, they thought it was bipolar and mania, because that's what it looked like from the outside. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Just thank you for sharing all of this. I think this will be so helpful for people. And I know, I remember talking to a guy who was at a clinic that I was working at, and he was there because of concussion issues. But I remember him asking about CTE, and he was terrified because he had played football and stuff. And so I guess I just kind of want to ask a few like questions for somebody who is like worried that they might have it or that their kids might have it or something. Like, let's just get some facts out there. And you said the only way to get diagnosed officially is for like studying the brain after death. Is that right?
Posthumously. Yeah. So currently that is the current reality. The CTE Center, Boston University, that's one of their goals. And I was actually on the phone with them yesterday, and they feel like within the next 5 years, they will be able to, or they will have a test or a way to diagnose. It won't be CTE. They're going to call it traumatic encephalopathy syndrome. But they believe that they'll have a test within the next 5 years to diagnose in living individuals. But in current, with what they have today, that is not something they can currently diagnose in living individuals. As far as, of course, everyone, I'm sure, could start to worry about, like, I played football. Could this happen to me? I talked with several of my brother's teammates, and, that was a similar sentiment. And it's real. And I can understand that there's a lot of concern. There's a sister or an affiliate collaborative group that's working with Boston University, the Concussion Foundation and the Legacy Concussion Foundation. And they actually have established a helpline for individuals to call into. They have a lot of resources online for individuals that feel like they might have it or that they might be experiencing symptoms. They offer a lot of reassuring words to individuals that have that concern, that there are plenty of people that probably have it and are living healthy, full, and productive lives. Having a diagnosis of CTE does not equate to like you're going to lose your mind and you're not going to be able to live out your days, which I think is really important to understand. Like my story of my brother and what he experienced is, I wouldn't say unique because it does happen, but it's not the norm. And that's part of why I wanted him or his brain to be studied, because I want to help other people know like what put my brother into that category. Like, were there other risk factors? Were there other parts about him and his past history, whether that's nature, nurture, like there's so many different things that could have led him down that road to where that became his reality. That does not mean that that's the eventual reality for everyone or anyone that has that concern. There are plenty of people that feel like they have it that are living successful lives. Their primary focus for those that are living that believe they might have it is on treating symptoms and symptom management, and then of course support. I think that especially in football players, there's this machismo air and quality to a lot of these players that they don't want to ask for help. They don't feel like they need help. There's nothing wrong with them. They're fine. They can deal with it on their own. And that I think is one of the things that I hope to help players understand, that this is not a sign of weakness to ask for help. If anything, it is a sign of strength that you are looking to better yourself, improve your own life, improve the lives of your loved ones that are around you, in looking for help. Like, are there resources out there that you can find and support that you can get to help you find balance and that support you need in your own life? There are resources out there. Please reach out. Please do what you can to get that support. It will only improve your own situation if at all possible. So that's definitely something that I want to make sure people understand, is that there is hope. There is hope even with CTE.
Thank you. I think that's beautifully said, and such a really, really, really important message to put out there, because this is a heavy topic. This is really hard and like tragic, to be honest. But to know that there is, like, I'm so grateful that there are places out there that are studying it, that research is being done. There's progress being made in this realm, and support for people. So that is huge. So thank you so much for sharing that. Is there, so if somebody suspects that they have it or a loved one has it, I think I know this about the Concussion Legacy Foundation, that they have support for the individuals as well as for family members, right?
They do, yeah. And that's what I wish we had or even known about. I don't know that it existed when we were going through some of this 10 years ago. It's been in existence at least for the last 7 years. I wish we had known that there were resources, because I was searching for anything that could help, and I did not know that that was an option.
Did you at the time, had you made the connection between football and what he was experiencing, or did that even not even cross your mind?
I had a very, very strong suspicion that it was related. It took a while for my parents to come around. I don't think that they fully, I think my dad, like the last couple of years of my brother's life, he actually started asking that same question, is football related? Like, could football have been part of, his decline? So it took a while for us as a family to really accept that that was the reality. But I had strong suspicions from several years ago, that led me to think. And that's, again, why I was studying about the brain bank. And it happened all so quick too. We found out about his passing on a Friday, and I called the brain bank on Sunday, like from my clinical background, I had a feeling that there's like a short time frame in which they need to procure the organs, to be transported. And so we found out about on Friday. I called Sunday afternoon, and they have a 24-hour hotline that you can call. Sunday afternoon, they answered within minutes. And I explained to them the situation. They were able to, and I was in Utah, they were able to, and of course, the person I was talking to was in Boston. They were able to facilitate a team to get to the medical examiner's office in California, where my brother was, within hours, to procure his brain and have it ready for transport on a Sunday.
Amazing.
Yeah, I'm forever grateful that they were able to mobilize and pull that together as quickly as they did, because apparently the window is 72 hours, and that would have been Sunday night. So,
wow.
So they were able to really pull that team together to support us, to support our family, and we're forever grateful for them for the research that they're doing, because it is a very unique niche. And of course, and I was talking with a gal yesterday, I mean, you're going up against the NFL, the NCAA. There's a lot of money on the other side of the conversation. And so it's something that I do hope that there will be more conversation about it. I know that they are making a lot of changes to how practices are run, to lessen the impact of head impact during practices as much as possible. That wasn't the case when my brother played. They were full contact in practices as well as the games, which I think was a huge factor. So I do think that they are making changes. They're recognizing that there is a connection. They might not be talking about it, but they're recognizing that there is a connection. So I do hope that in the years to come that there will be more discussion and conversation, at least for parents and kids, to understand that that there is a risk. Anytime you are messing with your brain, whether it's physical, chemical, like your brain is such a precious organ, that you want to keep it safe as much as possible. I mean, we wear helmets riding bikes for a reason, to protect our heads. And we're just learning more about how much even wearing helmets in football, it's not doing a lot to stop the brain from moving inside the skull.
Mm-hmm. So there's more to be done on that side of things as well. I thank you. If you don't mind sharing, how did it feel for you and your family to get that diagnosis? I know it took like a year, right, of the study, or how long?
It's 12 months, and they tell you that up front, that it's a very long process, partly because they want to do it right, but also because they are they do a pathological study and a clinical study. They have two teams of researchers, one that are just focused on the brain tissue. They actually don't know who the brain belongs to. They don't know the background. So there's no bias behind like what they're seeing. They're just reporting what they see. So they have a pathological team, and then they have a clinical team. The clinical team was, getting all of the actual like history. When did Greg start playing? What other, factors could have contributed to some of his symptoms? The clinical history. And then at the end of the 12 months, they come together as a panel to review both sides, to then come together with like a diagnosis, essentially. So yeah, it's a very methodical, thorough process. And we did find out earlier this summer the diagnosis. And I know for my mom and for myself as well, there was a lot of relief in that diagnosis. That was why, or how, what had caused his change, like the change to who he was, that it wasn't just, him. Like, I know that's kind of hard to understand or explain, but there was a lot of relief, really, in hearing that diagnosis. That painful, yes. It was very validating. Some of the theories that I had, yes, we weren't wrong. Like, there was a connection. But also just sadness that was how his life played out. Just he loved football. Football was his life. It was his family. And our my my take, the way that I've really tried to communicate this to those that I have this conversation with, it's like, I want this to be Greg's legacy, not how his life ended, but how he lived. And he lived for his team. He lived for the brothers on his team. And I know that he would want to do all that he can to support them and keep this conversation going, to further the research that they're doing so that it can help other players living or players that are younger that are trying to plan out their lives, understand the risks involved, and then just, be more aware of what football can do. And hopefully it will bring awareness and changes. But really, I want his legacy to be in how he lived and the people that he lived for. And football was such a huge part of him. And anything we can do to help improve the lives of players, because again, football is not going anywhere. It's in America, it's the new American pastime, right? It's not going anywhere. So anything we can do to help support them and make things better for them, I know what he would want.
Yes, that is so beautifully said. And yeah, that was perfect. Thank you. I can't like hear it without getting teary. Yeah, no, thank you for that. So what would you, I guess, on those lines, what advice would you give to young athletes and their parents in relation to this? If there's a, mom hearing this and like, oh my gosh, what am I gonna do? What advice do you have for them?
If you were to ask Dr. McKee, who runs the CTE center, she would say, don't play football. I don't know that we can ever go to that extreme. Football is a sport. I think it's just be aware of the risks. Be honest with yourselves about what the risks are and be as safe as possible. Anything head trauma, concussions, of course, like, be safe, take them seriously, but be honest with yourself and really recognize that any type of injury to your head, to your brain, is serious and adds up. So just, that, I think, for any parent, for any kid that's really looking at football and other sports as well, it's not just football, any contact sport where your head is involved, just to take it seriously and limit the head contact as much as possible. And that's, I think, the really the take home point is your brain is a precious commodity in your body. Treat it as such. Like, treat it as carefully as you possibly can.
Yes, amen. All of the outro of the podcast says, like, that last point is, take care of that amazing brain of yours. Brains are amazing. Take care of it. So and I do want to, like, just for clarity for people listening, if they're if somebody has had, let's say they didn't play contact sports but they've had multiple concussions, they had a car accident and then they had a fall, or like, if they've had multiple concussions, are they at risk of CTE? Is that something that they need to be worried about, or is it's more that, like, sub-concussive, like, and do you have to have had, sorry, I have so many questions. Do you have to have had a concussion in order to have CTE, or can it be purely the sub-concussive? So sorry, that was like questions.
So to answer the first question, a couple of concussions, they've actually came out and said, no, a couple of concussions does not put you at risk for CTE. It is 5 to 10 plus years of repetitive head traumas.
Okay.
Hundreds, if not thousands, of head traumas. 1 to 2, 3 or 4 even, they've come out and said, no, you're not at risk for CTE. It's the years worth of cumulative head trauma. They also have come out to say having a concussion, or you do not have to have a concussion to be diagnosed with CTE.
Okay.
Of course, it is more common for players that have played, 5 to 10 years in a contact sport to have had at least one concussion. I don't think you could go that long without having had at least one. But it's the sub-concussive, the repetitive minor head traumas that just add up over time. That's really where they're trying to focus the conversation around that. Less, now that they know more, less on the concussions, more on just head trauma in general, repetitive head trauma.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. And yeah, I this main part of this, or this podcast, is about concussions specifically, but this is so related and so intertwined. Yeah. I definitely think that that's going to be really helpful information.
Absolutely.
So thank you for that. We've covered a lot. Is there anything else that we haven't touched on, or that you feel you definitely want people to be aware of in relation to CTE or your brother's story?
I think the biggest thing is just that there is hope. It's not a terminal diagnosis. There is hope, there is support, but it's also a real thing, not to be taken lightly, and to really consider it. And as we learn more in the years to come, as you said earlier, it might be something that we look back on and say, how did we not know? How did we not realize? So know that what we know now, what we're, even what we're talking about today, it's still very early on in research. There's still so much that they're learning. So just keep an ear out for the research as they continue to push forward with what they're doing. And hopefully we'll find more out in the next 3 to 5 years, more than we know today.
Excellent. Thank you. Yes, hope is yes, important. I appreciate that perspective so much. Sorry, I was gonna have that be over, but I did want to ask one more, if that's okay.
Of course.
I know we've talked about the Concussion Legacy Foundation and what Boston University is doing, these programs that are there to support people. What, as like a family member, or like what advice you have to family members or to the person themselves, like if they're, in addition to finding that out, like how can they support each other, or what can be done, feet on the ground, like right now, like what advice do you have for family members or people dealing with this?
Honestly, it's looking and knowing that there are resources out there. We did not know that. So if you're hearing this, or if you hear it from a friend, that's the take home, is that there are resources out there. So use them. Use the resources that are available. And there are people that have gone through similar experiences that are out there willing and making themselves available to have those conversations and answer questions. So use that. Use those resources. That's the best thing that you can do, is use the resources that are available. Even if it is to learn more, even if it is to try and understand, like, is this what we're going through? There are resources out there that can answer those questions and give you some of that support that you might be looking for.
Thank you. And that's, when I ask this question in relation to concussions, a lot of times people say, like, go and look into it, like do research on it and understand that it is really a thing. And another thing that people often will say is believe your loved one who is struggling, like believe them, because I think, especially, it sounds like with CTE, maybe even more so, but it can be so confusing and feel so out of the blue, or like just not, like if you're questioning if something's off, then it might be, and it's worth looking into. So like believe the person.
Yeah. Believe the person. That was, I think, with my brother, and maybe with football players in general, we could see that he was reaching out for help. He was not asking us for help specifically, but you could see that he was reaching out for help, that something wasn't quite right. So it was more like through observation that we noticed something was off, and that it wasn't really him. I think that believing in what they're saying His reality was his reality. We could sit there and tell him all day that what he was saying, what he was experiencing wasn't true. It's like, again, that's why I think I started, it's a lot like Alzheimer's. It's a degenerative disease. Like one of the things that they tell family members that are dealing with a loved one who has Alzheimer's is don't correct them. They think that they're, a little kid again, or that it's 50 years ago. Don't correct them. That's just going to create more confusion, more stress. They're going to go into a spiral. CTE is a lot like Alzheimer's in that regard. We learned the hard way. It was not going to do us or him any good to try and correct him. What he needed was support and love. And that, I think, is the single biggest thing that people around him, even if he wasn't willing to receive it or ask for it, we did our best to help him know that we were there to support him and that we loved him. That, I think, is like the single biggest thing that anybody can do if they or someone they know is going through it or experiencing those symptoms.
Yeah, thank you. Yes. And I think like along with that, that's an excellent point that I wasn't even thinking when I talked about believing them. I was talking about like believe that they are having the symptoms that they're telling you, but if they're in that position where they're not even able to make sense of things themselves, then like believe them, don't try to argue with them, but also
right.
trust your gut that it might be off and it's worth looking into. And I love that. It's perfect. Like just love them and support them and be there for them. Have that compassion. I think you can't ever go wrong if that's your MO. So thank you so much for sharing this. We will put links to the Concussion Legacy Foundation and things in the show notes, as well as a link to a picture that you had mentioned before we got on, that shows an image of a brain with CTE next to one Alzheimer's, is that right? To kind of show,
or no, just a regular brain.
Oh, just not okay compared to a normal brain. Okay, yeah. So we'll put all that out there. Thank you so much for sharing this really tender thing, and we'll get this.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm so glad you listened in today. I hope you have gained some helpful insights and inspiration regarding dealing with and recovering from concussions. My goal is to create more awareness and education about concussions and the fact that there is so much that can be done to improve life after someone has had one. Help me spread the message by liking, commenting, rating, and subscribing to this podcast, and share it with others who would benefit from hearing it. There are more resources available on my website. And again, if you or someone you love would benefit from concussion coaching, sign up for a free consultation using the link in the show notes or at my website, www.theconcussioncoach.com. Thank you. See you next time, and take good care of that amazing brain of yours.